And hello YouTube. So this is Thomas Judge back once again with another instalment of my Ultimate New 52 reading guide. Just to give a bit of background, I have read the entire DC New 52, that's over 3,500 single issues, and I've used all that information to create the internet's most comprehensive reading guide for the entire New 52 in the form of a map and infographic that I've been walking through over these videos bit by bit. Today's video is video 5.4, which is yet another one in the Batman family of comics. Before we go any further and dive into the map, I would stress that even if you think you know what the New 52 is, or even if you only want to read one particular character like Batman or something like that, you still need to watch the introduction video in this series. It explains the overarching idea behind the New 52 and also defangs a lot of the jargon and terms that I'm going to be using during these videos. So I'm not going to re-explain them as I use them. If you watch this video today, you'll hear me talk about things like the convergence line, type P readers, and all that sort of stuff. That might seem a little bit confusing and a little bit complicated, so I would recommend that you go back and that you actually watch the introduction video, which has got a link in the description below. So with that out of the way, with no further ado, here is the Ultimate New 52 reading guide. And today's episode is, as I said, episode 5.4, the Batman family continued. We're going to cover two people today. The first one's going to be Nightwing, and for that let's firstly zoom in. If you zoom into the center as usual, you've got Flashpoint, and the Batman family are the black circles above Flashpoint. And there's quite a lot of them. We've covered 3 videos so far, and today's 4th video we're going to start here, just to the right or to the east of the main central line of Batman comics, and we're actually going to be starting with Nightwing, which is the first circle there. You can see me circling. So this was written between 2011 and 2014. It was written by Kyle Higgins. I really wanted to like this series, as I've always really liked the idea of Nightwing. However, I've always found every Nightwing comic I've ever read really disappointing, and this was no different. I haven't as yet read his really long running series in the early pre-New 52 era of, I think it was from 98 to 2009, so I've still got my fingers crossed that I'm really going to enjoy that, but unfortunately reading this New 52 series was a bit of a disappointment. So what you can see here is the cover to volume 1, and by volume 1 that's volume with a small v. This is a trade collection called Traps and Trapezes. It contains issues 1 to 7. As we scroll up, what we'll see here is the second volume with a small v, second trade collection of Nightwing, which is called Night of the Owls. Also very average, it collects issues 8 to 12 and issue 0. I will point out that both issues 8 and 9 are part of the crossover Night of the Owls. Maybe that's why they called this trade collection Night of the Owls. But don't be confused. The Night of the Owls event book is a separate book that I talked about in video 5.1. This trade collection happens to be called Night of the Owls as well, because it's got some of the crossover issues. Okay? Easy to get confused, so keep it clear. If we continue to head north down that line, we'll end up here with this image of Nightwing looking a little bit jokerized, and that is volume 3, and that's called Death of the Family. As I've mentioned several times before, a lot of the third trade collections in these series are called Death of the Family. Here on the left you can see the Batman, volume 3 is called Death of the Family, and on the right you can see Batman and Robin, volume 3 is called Death of the Family. Well, this one here in the middle is Nightwing, volume 3, Death of the Family. It's a weak and unnecessary tie-in to that event. I don't think it was very good, unfortunately. As with all of these tie-ins, the Nightwing collection can really be read as a standalone, as it does contain the finale issue Batman 17. As well as that, it contains Nightwing issues 13 to 18, and also a random one-shot called New 52 Young Romance, which doesn't exist in any other trade collection. Pretty disappointing, unfortunately. And of course, those Death of the Family crossover issues are in the Death of the Family event book I mentioned in video 5.1 as well. So let's move up. Straight after Death of the Family, it almost seamlessly goes straight into this next volume, which is volume 4, called Second City. So you really need to read these two back to back and without a break between them. Volume 4, Second City, contains issues 19 to 24, and that's available there. And like I say, it's pretty average. Let's continue following this line up, and we will just about cross the Forever Evil line, which I'll mention in a moment again because it's really, really important for this series. But here we have volume 5, which is called Setting Sun. It's also very average. It contains issues 25 to 30 and annual 1. So if you want to pick it up as a trade collection, there it is. Now what I will say is this takes us, like I say, up to the Forever Evil line. And whilst the events of Forever Evil don't directly affect too many series in the New 52, the effect here in Nightwing is profound. And as a result of Forever Evil, Nightwing gets cancelled and gets directly replaced by a new series. So you'll see this line coming out here. Let's follow this along. It's quite a way, and here we are. This is volume 1 of Grayson. Now, before I talk about the series Grayson, there's a few common misconceptions that I just want to clarify about this series. It's almost always described as being written by Tom King. That's not true. The truth is it was co-written by Tim Seeley and Tom King until issue 17, and the rest of it was written by Colin Kelly and Jackson Lansing to the end. So Tom King wrote or co-wrote the issues for the first 2/3 of the run, and so he wrote about half of 2/3 of it. As the story itself is an espionage thriller, and as King is often described as a former CIA counterterrorism officer, I can see why DC let this hype grow. A lot of fans got really into it as a result. The truth, however, is that he only had some involvement. Keep in mind, this is in the time before Tom King became the overwhelming DC juggernaut he is today. So whilst I was really excited to read the Grayson series, in the end, despite the hype, I felt the series was overrated and I ended up feeling quite disappointed in it. So here we've got volume 1, volume with a small v, trade collection 1, that's Agents of Spiral. It contains issues 1 to 4 and the Future's End one-shot. As we continue up, we then get to a volume here, which is called We All Die at Dawn. This is the second trade collection, so volume 2. That contains issues 5 to 8 and annual 1. As we continue here, we go past the Convergence line, which isn't a big deal for this series. And here we have volume 3 of Grayson, which is called Nemesis. It contains issues 9 to 12 and annual 2. And then as we go up here, we'll have volume 4. Now, volume 4 of Grayson is called A Ghost in the Tomb. It contains issues 13 to 16 and both issues 1 and issues 2 of Robin War. So that's Robin War one-shot, issue 1, and Robin War one-shot, issue 2. This is the core of the crossover, which I'm going to call crossover 6, Robin War. This is the first time we've talked about Robin War so far in these videos, and this is the final crossover I've yet to mention. This crossover event is available in its own standalone event book here, but that standalone event book also takes issues from Robin, Son of Batman, Gotham Academy, Detective Comics, Red Hood and Arsenal, and Teen Titans. So if I scroll back, you'll see that what you can do if you do want to sort of loop a circle around all those is you'd put a circle here around Robin, Son of Batman, and Grayson, Gotham Academy. Actually, it also includes We Are Robin as well, all the way over to Death of the Comics, Detective Comics here to the west as well. So you can sort of loop them all together with a bit of a wiggly line if you want to have the whole Robin War series. However, if you're going to read them in single issues, the reading order is here on the screen, and you can either read the whole event book as one, which I would recommend, but if you don't want to, you can just read the issues of the volume of Grayson you can see here. Thankfully, this Grayson volume, volume 4, A Ghost in the Tomb, will still make sense, but will lack a lot of the extra detail that the Robin War crossover would benefit from. Hope that makes sense, guys, and that's the last crossover we're going to talk about. As I mentioned before, I have made some effort to make sure that any crossovers are grouped together on the map, so you can always just have a line and join them all up and then follow them through that way, if you want to do that. So let's continue this line up and we'll get to the very last volume of Grayson. This is volume 5 called Spiral's End. That's Spyrals, End, Spiral's End. And that finishes this series with issues 17 to 20. So obviously this is when Tom King and Tim Seeley have left the book. And it brings me to an annoying point that I feel I have to make here. You can read this series by itself, and it's okay. But a lot of the ending actually picks up threads from Morrison's Batman Incorporated run. And by that, I mean his pre-New 52, volume 1, volume with a big V, Batman Incorporated run, which is this one you can see on screen. I discussed this in video 5.3, so you might want to check out that video, and then you might want to check out Batman Incorporated volume 1, volume with a big V, 1, before you read Grayson, just to fully understand what's going on. Even if you're a type J reader and you're quite casual about these things, you might find that more helpful. Anyway, the ending of issue 20 is a bit of an annoying cliche, to be honest. Long story short, it has a ludicrous development that just resets the status quo to allow Dick Grayson to resume his mantle as Nightwing in DC Rebirth, despite events in Forever Evil that really should have made that impossible. But there we are. These are all available as trade paperbacks. If you do want it in a hardcover format and you do like Grayson that much, it has been released as a single omnibus here, which I believe is either out of print or going out of print. That collects all the issues within it, but none of the Robin War crossover issues. It still makes sense though. The only other thing worth noting about Grayson is that it crosses over with and features the character of Midnighter several times, as well as also introducing his door technology and the Carrier. Now, I'm not going to talk about Midnighter today. Midnighter is from the former Wildstorm universe, now owned by DC, and I'll be discussing him as a character and the Wildstorm generally in videos 11.1 and 11.2. Back to the map, and on that note, I should probably mention that when you read other series set at this time, if anyone does mention Dick, it will be referring to him in his new Grayson spy role. The only series I can remember doing that is Batman and Robin Eternal, but don't be surprised if you see it in a few other series where they keep on referring to him as something like Agent Grayson or Agent 37 or things like that. And that was Nightwing, and a surprise edition of talking about the series Grayson as well. So I'm going to zoom out and I'm going to zoom back just to give you guys a bit of perspective as to where we are. So let's go back to the beginning. We've got a bit of time today, so I'm going to cover one more series, and I'm going to cover a real outlier to the Batman series, the one right at the end, most to the right, most to the east of Batman, and that is Batwoman. And that's this one here, which we haven't covered yet. So, Batwoman was a series that ran from 2011 to 2015. It's one of those new 52 series which is available as hardcovers throughout, which is nice. And it was actually one of those indications to me that this is probably a good series and worth checking out, because that's why they would have given it a hardcover, surely. I was very excited to read this, and that was well before the new CW show starring Ruby Rose was announced, which I was also very excited to hear. What you can see here is Volume 1, which is called Hydrology. That contains issues 0 to 5. If you follow this line across, we will have Volume 2, which is called To Drown the World. That contains issues 6 to 11. It's worth pointing out there's no Night of the Owls crossover here. This is our first indication, really, of how disconnected from the Bat family Batwoman as a series really is. Let's continue following that line up, and what we have here is Volume 3, which is called World's Finest. This collection contains issues 0 and issues 12 to 17. You'll notice that here, unlike most Volume 3 Bat books, this does not contain a Death in the Family crossover. Like I said, this is a very disconnected series. Now, if you're paying very close attention to this video, you're possibly thinking I made a mistake in all that just now. Well, I'm afraid that issue 0, for some reason, is collected both in Trade Collection 1, Hydrology, and Trade Collection 3, World's Finest. The same issue is collected in each of those, so it's collected twice. I don't know why that is. Just zooming out a little bit so you can get a bit of a better idea of the artwork and where this fits in. I just want to point out, these volumes have sumptuous painted covers by J.H. Williams III, who also co-wrote the issues with Hayden Blackman. These covers are beautiful, and actually internal artwork is great too. And in fact, the internal writing is really well done. I mean, it tails off at the end, unfortunately, but generally I really liked it. I love this version of Batwoman. I had never really read much Batwoman before, so I thought it was great. I found her relationship with Maggie Sawyer really interesting. Spoiler warning, Batwoman is a lesbian in this series. I assume she always has been. I don't know much about the character. I also found her relationship with her father really interesting and well characterised. Basically, loads of stuff about the series was really good, but I didn't like it as a whole. And the reason, and I'm not trying to be controversial here, I know that Batwoman can sometimes be a little bit of a lightning rod of controversy on the internet. I'm just going to be candid. The problem I had with this series was in one area alone. The antagonists for all the story arcs are just dissatisfying. They all had some kind of supernatural aspect, which personally I'm not a fan of, or they were just shallow and poorly characterised, or they were just dull. Essentially, this series had so many great things going for it. The art, the writing, the protagonists, the antagonistic interaction with the Bat family, the supporting cast. But ultimately, there are very few superhero comics that can work in the absence of even vaguely compelling villains. And as a result, I just could not get on board with Batwoman. Anyway, let's continue our look through, and as we get to the Forever Evil line here, we have got Volume 4. So Volume 4 is called This Blood is Thick, contains issues 18 to 24. As we continue up, we get to Volume 5, which is this one here, really out by itself now. This is called Webs, like spider webs. So it's called Webs. Contains issues 25 to 34 and Annual 1. And then right at the end, this series ends here with Trade Collection 6, which is called The Unknowns. And The Unknowns contains issues 35 to 40, The Futures End Batwoman one-shot, and Annual 2. This takes us up to the Convergence line, as you can see just above us there. And it's at this point the series was cancelled. Now, there's a lot of talk about the political agenda at DC that led to the cancellation of it, and a lot of the controversy from the writers and the creators about why it was cancelled. I don't want to talk about that here, but if you are interested in the scandal and the gossip, feel free to Google it. So that's the Batwoman series of comics. I'm just going to slide back a little bit here. And that's where we were on the map, ladies and gentlemen. So that's the end of this video, which was a deep dive into some more New 52 Batman related stuff. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. As always, please like, comment, subscribe and share more widely. I'd be really interested to hear your thoughts on the New 52 and on this series of videos as it's going. Is the Batman family everything you wanted from the Batman part of this series? Is it clear enough? Are there any questions you have? Hit me up in the comments below or tweet me at @IamThomasJudge. And as always, these videos are only possible thanks to supporting this channel by heading over to Amazon.com and picking up the first episode of my prose novel, No Gods or Kings. It's available for less than $1 and it's more than 200 pages of content. It's a series of interviews from a future where superpowers are real and the entire world has changed dramatically as a result. If you have Kindle Unlimited, the first volume is already completely free. For those of you that are interested in downloading this map and infographic I've created for the video, that's also available on my website, nogodsorkings.com. which is in the description below. So whilst you're there, why not pick up the first book and support the channel? Until then, stay classy.